Today we're going to talk about ghosts, ancestors, and death, which I think is really fitting for the month and the season that we're heading into here. I'm so excited to be back on here for another episode. If you heard the last episode, I mentioned that I may not be on here much until next year as I finish up a really big project I'm working on. Also just heal up my lungs post-COVID. I had COVID and then it activated a dormant monovirus. So I had EBV and then I also got pneumonia and a sinus infection. It was just like nonstop there for a minute. And I feel like I'm pretty much 100%. So that's good. But yeah, COVID definitely took me down there for a second. But I'm really, really excited about this project that I'm working on, and I'll share more with you guys as it goes along. So if you're not subscribed to my newsletter, I would go to charlenewindus.com and subscribe, because that's where you'll find all the updates on this project. And what I'm doing is I am making a spiritually activated oracle card deck, and I did this ritual a while back to ask spiritually that the images and that the words and activations come to me channeled, so that it wasn't just me coming up with the ideas. And after I did that ritual, I would just be cooking. I would be doing normal stuff, and I would start getting these images and activations and words. So I just kept a pen and paper all over the house, and I would write stuff down every time it came through. And I got 72 images and activations for an oracle card deck, and I'm just so excited. And I finally found an artist who's a good friend of mine to work with me on the deck. It's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. It's taking a long time to get it together and a lot of hours. At first, I was trying to do all the graphic design myself, but I have no experience. I don't understand how to use like Adobe Illustrator. So I watched a lot of videos and was trying to do it myself. Then I finally just decided I needed to hire a graphic design person to help me do the deck. And so after that happened, it felt like things started to really fall in alignment. We found a printer, we picked out our box. So all these things are happening, but it's still going to be several months before it gets to print. Just even creating 72 pieces of art is taking a long time to do. And we all have, regular jobs and other things going on too. So that is why I'm putting the podcast on hold until we can get that project fully up and loaded for the printer. But I couldn't resist getting back on here for at least one episode in October, hopefully more, to talk with you guys today about ghosts and ancestors and death, which are some great topics to explore in the month of October. Also, I wanted to mention that you can find me at some markets this season coming up here in the fall and in the winter. I'll be at the Yule Celebration Holiday Market, which is put on by the Metaphysical Market, and that's December 3rd. It's a Saturday from 11 to 5 at the Stille Valley Center in, I believe it's Arlington. But you can check out my newsletter to find out any other places where you can come and say hi. I'll be having a table at these markets with my sprays and my ritual bath products, anointing oils, and some other really fun, supportive, spiritual tools and ritual support items. So come check me out and come say hi if you're in the area. October being my absolute favorite month to be in ritual with my ancestors here in the Pacific Northwest, and to really turn inward as the weather and the daylight shifts, and to start getting cozy with soups and warm, yummy drinks, and really just a time to reflect on death and dying. And that's just become my personal month for really tapping into this energy. My ancestors, October has just become such an enjoyable month for me to really work a little bit deeper in those areas and in those ways. So why would you consider partaking in ancestral healing rituals or connecting to your ancestors? Let's talk about that first, because I think that's really important. If somebody had said that to me years ago, I would have had no interest in that. I wouldn't even really know what they were talking about. And so when I'm talking about working with your ancestors, I'm talking about the ones that are healed. So the ones that have already gone through their healing processes, the ones that have crossed over with the other well ancestors, and the ones that are before a lot of these patterns and behaviors and disconnect happened with my European ancestors. And so that's what I'm talking about. And so for you, that may look different. You may come from a different line of ancestors. You may feel really well about your ancestors. So it's going to be different and unique for every person. But when I'm working with my ancestors in the past, I was working with those already healed ancestors from a long time ago and working with an ancestral guide that was from that time period. And then I took a really amazing class with Daniel Foor, Foor. I highly recommend his work and his classes and his book. It's called Ancestral Medicine. He does such a great job at really putting a structure and a system to guiding you into helping, or not even guiding. It's sort of like you're just kind of witnessing the facilitation of healing of your ancestors. And when we can help the ones that are unhealed, we can help ourselves. We can connect more spiritually. We have more spiritual allies. The healing that we do ripples into our family, our community, the land we live on, into collective consciousness. So anytime we're doing anything where we're working on ourselves in some way, especially with ancestors, we're doing incredible healing work. So if it's something that calls to you, or you feel like there's patterns, cycles, behaviors that have continued on in you that aren't really you, or if you feel unwell or unhealed in terms of being able to connect and call upon your ancestors for spiritual support, then that might be something to really look at doing. And of course, Daniel Foor is just one method or one way of doing that. So once I completed that course with him and that healing work with the family line that I had that was really troubled, I now have a completely different mindset, awareness, and feeling about my ancestors and my current ancestors in that line. And so now I'm able to confidently and safely engage with my ancestors in that way, because now they're healed and now they're reconciled, essentially. And so there's kind of a lot to it. So it's not as simple as like, oh, I just want to, well, I guess it can be simple where you just want to like make an offering or have a ritual with your ancestors. But our ancestors can be a spiritual support. So they can be an ally. They can be someone that we call upon, someone that we work with in our spiritual work, in our rituals, in our daily prayers, in our intentions. And just to feel like you have a crew, like a really well-established community that's with you spiritually, they can be that. But first, you do have to do the work, and you do have to find a way to not connect so much with the ones that are unwell and have really safe parameters around that, because our unwell ancestors can influence us. They can influence us to drink more. They can influence us to have certain behaviors. If they're not well and they're still in ghost form, which we're going to talk about ghosts here in a minute, then they're able to have more of an impact influentially on our energy and our psyche, whether we're aware of it or not. And so just some simple practices like asking your ancestors that are not well to kind of move away, and asking the ones that are well to come closer. That's a practice that I was guided through in Daniel Foor's class. And so again, I really recommend you check out his work. It's really amazing. It gives you a lot of structure and tools around how to work safely in this way with your ancestors. You can still do an ancestor ritual without doing all that work. You can still make it your own and do what resonates with you. So just set your intentions that you are wanting to work with the healthy and well ancestors, and then you can do your ritual and your work that way. So it doesn't have to be super complicated, but when you get into it, there's kind of a lot of layers to it. And why we might do the offerings or the rituals or the connections is so that we can build that rapport and that relationship with our spiritual allies, our ancestors, in that way. And also just to stay connected, so that we're not feeling disconnected or out of sorts and things like that. So when we're connected to that energy, it feels really good. So that might be a reason why you might want to do an ancestor ritual. It's a way to keep their spirit alive, engaged, so they're not forgotten. So there's a lot of reasons that you might want to do an ancestor ritual. I'm heading into this month where I really love doing it, and I don't really like to have any hard set rules around what I do with this. I just go with the flow and I listen to my heart and I let that lead. But generally I'll put up some kind of an ancestor altar around the autumn equinox, and I'll leave it up until after about the 1st of November. Halloween is a really big deal in my house with my kids. I met their dad on Halloween, so that's kind of a special day for us. We love decorating the ancestor altar with a Halloween theme, and I like to have an offering plate with pumpkins, cinnamon, and oranges, which never go bad the entire month of October on the altar. And one year I had a pumpkin that didn't go bad for an entire year after the altar was taken down, and it was really cool to see. But I just kept checking on it going, this pumpkin is just like never going to rot. This is incredible. So there's some kind of really cool things that can happen with the altar as well to just be a part of and to witness. I also like to add battery operated candles, and I like to turn the light on the candles every day. And when I do that, when I go to turn on the candlelight, I just think about my ancestors. I say hello and I welcome the true and healed ancestors into my life and ask, the ones that are not healed to step back. And then I also will add photos if I feel like that's something that they are okay with. Often I'll check in and ask permission. And then I'll have fresh flowers or herbs. And then I'll initiate the altar for the first time with a big prayer with blessings and gratitude. And then I'll do another big prayer when I take the altar down. So, that's kind of the general consensus of like how I like doing it. But it's really festive. My kids think it's fun. I feel good doing it. I like it. I just really enjoy rituals. So that's a little bit about my ancestor altar and kind of what I head into in October. So if you want to head back to episode 2, season 1, we talk about Samhain and Halloween and ancestors in that episode as well. So if you haven't checked out that, you might want to. And then as far as Daniel Forrest classes, he has a class on death and dying. It's like pre-recorded, and I think it's like 5 or 6 90-minute classes that you can get to get more comfortable with death and dying, to kind of understand it more spiritually. And then he also has a class, I think it's called Introduction to Spirit Contact. So that's a really helpful pairing if you don't already have experience with that. And I've just learned a lot from him. He's a great teacher. And he also has scholarship options, and he has a really inclusive space. So check him out at ancestralmedicine.org if you're looking to explore that a little bit more. So today I want to dive into ghosts with you and help you deconstruct the fears that most people have individually and collectively, and hopefully learn something healing and healthy about how not to become a ghost. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you to clear your space and yourself in whatever way works for you, with smoke, spray, sound, or simply just ask a trusted guide or ally to do this for you. You can lay down on the earth. You can invite the sun or the moon to help clear your energy, whatever works for you. And you can pause this and then come back to it if that works. And then ask a healed ancestor, guide, or ally, or a trusted deity, or really wherever you spiritually anchor, just to protect you from anything that's not the highest good. This is really important when we come into a conversation, when we're talking about things like ghosts, that we do a really good protocol in protecting ourselves, clearing ourselves, and supporting ourselves to have that conversation. And then ask your higher self to strengthen into your heart. Make sure that you drop your grounding cord. So just imagine that your spine is growing all the way down to the core of the earth. And you just want to be cleared and ritually set up for this kind of conversation. And the reason for that is it can trigger or stimulate energies. And so we just want to make sure that we're backing ourselves up before we head into this conversation. And we want to have a healthy sense of ourself and our inner power and be in our full power if we're talking about things like this. So however you get there, go do it. If you're already there, that's great. And let's dive in. So what is a ghost? A ghost is a person who is now gone from their physical body that they were inhabiting and is kind of stuck or wandering around the physical plane here on Earth. So here's what I want to know. Why is everyone so afraid of ghosts when ghosts are simply us? It's just humans, except now you don't have a body. Media and movies and religion and so many things have just fed into and like kind of demonized ghosts. And it's like, really, all it is us who kind of need a little bit of help. We need a little direction. We need a little support. Might need a little guidance. And sometimes we're here for so long, nobody sees us, hears us, feels us, ignores us, whatever, that we forget even who we are. And sometimes there's phenomenon and things that might happen around that. People have so many experiences out there that talk about them. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have some, I guess, safety awareness around this, because ghosts can influence us. They can affect our energy. And there's also the instances of possession and other things like that. So there are many levels to it. It's good to have a healthy amount of awareness, but not necessarily fear. And the more scared we are, the more we feed into the fear or the drama of the situation, the more it sort of hypes up that energy and makes it even more intense. So if we can just stay really grounded, not jump into that fear and drama, and just really go, you know what? If I'm having an experience and I see, hear, or feel a ghost, it's probably because they need some help. On the rare occasion, it may not be a ghost and it may be something else, but for the most part, they probably need some help. So, and it doesn't mean that you're the one that's going to help them. But what you can do is you can be in your power. You can be really firm with your intentions about how you want to engage with this energy. And you can have a healthy awareness of safe practices. And most of the time, they just need the help or acknowledgement. So just dial it back and consider that in our Western culture, if we can even call it a culture, has completely cut itself off from all like burial and death rituals that our ancestors were all practicing. We don't really help the spirits of our bodies and our family members transition in a healthy way with ease. There's so many lost practices. And so if we don't talk about these things, if we don't heal these things, if we don't re-engage with these things, then we're just going to like continue to have ghosts, hanging around. And many of us don't really tend to live an amended life, a reconciled life every single day. And so if you leave this world with unfinished business or regrets or troubles, we can get stuck. We can get stuck in ghost form. And so what can we do if we encounter a ghost? You have a lot of options. You can dismiss the energy and demand that it have no contact with you personally, because you do have free will. You do have control over your energy and your space. And so you can just dismiss it. I don't want it. It's not mine. I'm not interested. This is my power. This is my space. I'm taking up the space. I'm the one in a body. I don't want it. That's one option. You can invite a helping spiritual ally to assist with the ghost and then cut contact with your intention and your will. So you simply just invite in a positive spiritual trusted ally and ask that somebody help, somebody of the highest good help this person, this ghost, and then cut the contact with your free will and with your intention. Or if you're skilled and trained in doing so, you can help the ghost. And if you're not skilled in that and you're interested in that, you can find a teacher, a program, or a class that resonates with you. If you start looking around and that's a real calling for you, you will find what you need there. And I'll recommend Daniel 4 for a really good starting point for some of that. So what are the safety things to think about with ghosts? Well, because energies can merge, can possess, can influence, and can affect you, you need to have some pretty hard lines on how you engage for safety. But this can happen every day, all day, in all places and spaces. This is just a bit more direct, which makes it there's more energetic interference when something's direct versus, you just walking through a community space that has ghosts kind of a thing. If it's directly like in your house or affecting you directly, it's going to be a little bit more of an interference energetically. But you have to remember that free will and intention are very big spiritual protections in staying in your power. Those are big allies for you. So if you intend that you will not be affected and that no energy will merge with you, and that if you anchor and source yourself spiritually somewhere, you can utilize your free will choice and most likely you won't be affected in the same way. So it's really about staying in your power in whatever way that is for you. Sometimes you might need to call a professional for help in some instances, but for the most part, you really just need to have some compassion for death and dying and for the dead. And to remember that they were just people who might be lost or scared or confused or in need of some help, and always stand in that power, but realize that a majority of these issues are resolvable. There are some things outside of ghosts, like entities and other forces, that are a whole nother ballgame. That is not the same as ghosts. So I wouldn't engage with that kind of energy ever, period. But when we're specifically talking about ghosts, let's say you lost a close family member and maybe you're still grieving and wishing they were here, and maybe they were still wishing they were here. And just the combination of those two energies can hold them here, essentially, on the middle plane. And so just thinking about, that's not necessarily a negative thing. And there's lots of traditions and cultures and practices that have processes for this, where some cultures release the spirit after 1 year, the spirit stays with the family. Other people release the spirit when they do their own ritual, or maybe they have a process that they're going to do. Like when my grandma passed away, we took her ashes and we did a little ritual in the ocean. And it was in that moment that I felt like there was a release. We put some flowers in the water and this beautiful seal came up and swam around us. It was just this really beautiful experience. And in that moment, I felt like there was sort of a release. And so it's not always like, oh gosh, it's a terrible ghost. Sometimes it's just a close family member. But again, we want to be able to let them move to wherever it is they go next, rather than kind of hanging out on the middle plane here with people that have bodies. And so it's important that we have that conversation with that loved one, or find a ritual or a process, or do something that is connective culturally or traditionally or familiar or ancestral that feels good, that helps with that process. So if we're all kind of just taking care of ourselves and living that amended life every day, then generally when it happens, we won't be stuck here ourselves. And so what does that mean? That means finding forgiveness, processing your emotions, the entire spectrum, not just the good emotions, getting your life organized for your end of life. What are your medical directives? What is your will? Where do you want your stuff? What do you want done with your body? Having kind of all of that stuff worked out so that when you do pass, you're not leaving any attachments behind. You're not leaving a lot of work behind for your loved ones, or fighting or challenges that would normally happen if none of this was figured out. And so just really connecting with death and dying and grief and rituals and rites of passage and celebrations, and kind of making that just like a part of your awareness now, so that when we do pass, it's a much easier transition for everyone. In my work, I have run into so many ghosts. I mean, before I saw a ghost, I didn't even think that anything happened to us. I wasn't an atheist per se. I think I was more of an agnostic, but it wasn't even until I saw a ghost that I believed that there was more going on in that way. And often what happens is close relatives and loved ones of the clients that might be on my table will often show up, and they usually just have one thing to say. Either they want to be acknowledged and heard. Sometimes it's more, sometimes there's contracts that need to be released, or agreements and other things that need some tending to. But a lot of the times they're coming to chat. And in the very beginning, I wasn't able to tell the difference between like a well ancestor and a ghost, because to me, they looked like people. They looked like the people that they were when they were here. And then as I worked a little bit more, I realized like the way that it came in for me was that a ghost would look more see-through or hologram. I'd still see the outline, and I would get more heavier like feelings and communication auditorily. And an ancestor would look more like a full filled in person. And that's not going to be the same way it is for everybody. I think it really depends on your clairsenses and your psychic senses and your intuition in terms of like how that might show up for you. But that's kind of how I like figured that out for several sessions with that. And so I would see the ghosts coming as like a projection from my mind's eye outward, and then the ancestors would look like actual physical people in front of me. So that's kind of how it came through for me. But almost every single time they show up, it's because they have something that they need to reconcile. And most often, it really doesn't have much to do with the person on the table. So I find that sometimes in those sessions that the person on the table is wanting reconciling themselves, or they have something they want to remedy with this loved one. But really, they're not the one that's dead. The one that's not here anymore is the one that needs the priority there. So it's sort of like you have to let go of whatever your things were with the person and let them have their peace, let them have their reconciliation. And then you can go back and revisit that later under the guidance of another facilitator or with yourself and do it at another time. But generally when they show up, it's because they need to reconcile something so that they can feel complete. And so if you have the desire or calling to support the dead, it is something that's needed, and it is something that's really rewarding and worthwhile, and you can be trained in it. For me, it wasn't something that I like sought out. It just kind of showed up while I was doing other energetic and spiritual type work. And then I was able to then follow up with training afterwards to kind of help guide me in what was happening. So yeah, if you feel like you want to explore that some more, then there's lots of resources out there to do that. But remember to stay in your power. Remember to use your free will. Remember to spiritually resource yourself and feel anchored somewhere so that, you're not negatively influenced when you're doing this work. So I guess in this conversation, what I really wanted to help with or teach or offer up here is to not be so scared. Don't be in fear over ghosts. Don't go looking for them. Don't get too worried, if you're having an interaction. Stay in your power, spiritually resource, get grounded, call upon some spiritual help or allies, and just really recognize your free will and your sovereignty, and that you're the one in a body, and that you can engage from that point, not from a point of feeling scared. And then recognizing that most often they really just need help as well. So make sure that you kiss your loved ones, tell them that you love them, make sure that you're living life the way you want to live life. And think about, if you don't already have this done, having your end of life set up so that the transition process is a little easier. And think about exploring more ancestral healing, ancestral reconnection work, and go where your heart's leading you with that and where it feels good. But those are all some things to think about when thinking about ghosts, ancestors, and death and dying. Thank you for listening to the Flowering Daydream podcast. This is Charlene Windus. I'm your host, and you can find me at charlenewindus.com, on Insight Timer, on Udemy, and coming up at some really fun holiday markets.